Come in, take a seat, because what you're about to hear isn't just another courtroom story, it's a wake-up call. You are watching Judge Frank Caprio Courtroom Justice, and in this courtroom, we don't just deal with violations, we deal with people. People with struggles, people with stories, and sometimes people who believe the rules simply don't apply to them. Every day we try to balance justice with compassion. We look past the paperwork and into the lives behind it. But none of that works unless everyone who enters this room understands one simple truth. Respect is the foundation of justice. And today's case? Well, it shattered that foundation the moment it began. This isn't a parking violation or a simple traffic mistake. This is a story about arrogance colliding with accountability, about a young woman who walked into this courtroom convinced that her family's name, wealth, and status placed her above the law. She thought the world was a monopoly board, and her last name came with a permanent get-out-of-jail-free card. What happened next? It became one of the most unforgettable moments in my entire career. But before we dive into this unbelievable case, make sure you subscribe to Case Closed, because stories like this remind us why justice matters and why no one, absolutely no one, stands above it. The case of Cassandra Davenport. The case before us is that of Miss Cassandra Davenport, a 22-year-old resident of our state. The charges are numerous and severe. Driving at a speed of 112 miles per hour in a 55-mile-per-hour zone on Interstate 95, reckless driving, endangering public safety, failure to stop for a police officer, and operating a motor vehicle with a suspended license for the third time in 18 months. Now, before we even get to the details of that night, November 28, 2025, just a few days ago, it's important to understand the context. Context is everything in this courtroom. Ms. Davenport is the daughter of Deputy Director Michael Davenport of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a man who has spent more than 30 years of his life in distinguished service to this country, enforcing its laws and bringing criminals to justice. He is a man whose name is synonymous with integrity. I want you to hold on to that fact. It's the central paradox of this entire affair. A detail so sharp and so ironic that it cuts through everything else. The daughter of a man who represents the very pinnacle of law and order, standing in a local municipal court for behavior that shows a complete and utter contempt for it. This isn't just a legal case. It's a family tragedy playing out under the harsh lights of a courtroom. And you're about to find out that the charges themselves, as serious as they are, were not even the most stunning part of her appearance. An entrance devoid of respect. When Ms. Davenport's name was called, she approached the bench with a posture that spoke volumes before she ever uttered a single word. While most people who stand here are nervous, humbled, or at the very least attentive, Ms. Davenport was bored. She sauntered forward, chewing gum, her eyes flitting around the room as if she were waiting for a better party to begin. She was on her phone, typing a message as she walked. I paused. I was trying to give people a moment to collect themselves, to understand the gravity of the situation. I said, "Good morning, young lady. Would you mind putting your phone away? This is a court of law, and your case requires your full attention." She looked up, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes, and slid the phone into her back pocket with an exaggerated sigh. She didn't say, "Yes, Your Honor." She didn't say anything. The silence was her answer. It was a silence filled with disdain. You learn to read people. You see the fear in a mother who can't pay a fine, the shame in a man who made a foolish mistake, the genuine remorse in a young person who has let their parents down. In Miss Davenport, I saw none of that. I saw only privilege, a deep ingrained belief that the rules that govern everyone else did not apply to her. But I still held out hope. I thought maybe she's just having a bad day. Maybe the reality of the situation hasn't sunk in yet. I was about to find out just how wrong I was. The rabbit hole of disrespect was far deeper than I imagined. The unveiling of a record. I picked up the file in front of me. It was unusually thick for a traffic case. I adjusted my glasses and looked at her. "Miss Davenport," I began, "these are very serious charges. Driving at over 110 miles per hour is not a mistake. It's a decision that turns a 2-ton vehicle into an unguided missile. You didn't just endanger yourself, you endangered every single person on that highway." She rolled her eyes, a full theatrical roll of the eyes followed by a quiet scoff. The microphone at her podium was sensitive. It picked up the sound and amplified it throughout the courtroom. A murmur went through the gallery. People who had come for their own small fines and violations suddenly sat up a little straighter. They knew they were about to witness something out of the ordinary. "Before I ask you for your plea," I continued, keeping my voice even, "I want to review your driving history. Because your past is prologue, Miss Davenport, our choices follow us." I opened the file. "Let's see here. In the last 3 years, since you turned 19, you have been issued, my goodness, 27 citations." I paused to let that number sink in. "That's almost one for every month you've been legally driving." I read them aloud. 14 for speeding, with 3 of those in school zones, 6 for illegal use of a mobile device while driving, 4 for running red lights, 2 for improper lane changes that resulted in minor accidents, and this is your 3rd charge for driving with a suspended license. The state of Rhode Island has sent you so many official warnings by registered mail that your file has its own dedicated postage budget. I looked up at her, expecting, hoping for some flicker of recognition, of shame. There was nothing. Her expression was flat, impatient. It was the look of someone waiting in a long line at the DMV. "Your father," I said, my voice softening slightly, "Deputy Director Davenport, is a man who has built a career on the idea that no one is above the law. I have to believe that he taught you that principle. So I have to ask you, what do you think he would say if he were standing here, watching you treat this proceeding like an inconvenience?" This was the moment where she could have changed the entire course of her future, a moment for humility, a moment for apology, a moment for a daughter to show that she understood the weight of her father's legacy. She did not take it. The mockery that sealed a fate. She leaned into the microphone. A small, smug smile played on her lips, and she said, in a voice dripping with condescension, "Honestly, I think my father would tell you to wrap this up so I can make my 1 p.m. brunch reservation at the Vanderbilt." The courtroom fell into a stunned silence. The air became thick. I have been threatened, I have been yelled at, I have been cajoled. But the sheer, unadulterated arrogance of that statement was in a category all its own. She wasn't just disrespecting the court. She was wielding her father's name like a weapon, assuming it would grant her immunity. But she wasn't finished. As I sat there, momentarily speechless, she did something that crossed a line from arrogance into pure mockery. She pulled out her phone again, held it up, and took a selfie. She turned her head to get the angle right, with me and the American flag in the background. Then, with her thumbs flashing across the screen, she posted it online. The court officer, a good man named Sergeant DeMasi, took a step toward her. I held up my hand to stop him. "Miss Davenport," I said, my voice now low and firm, stripped of all its earlier warmth. "What did you just do?" She looked up from her phone, her smile widening. "Just letting my friends know I'm surviving this absolute nightmare. I think I'll caption it, 'Bored in court, lol. What do you think, Judge? Is that funny?'" And then she laughed, a light, airy laugh that echoed in the dead, silent room. That was it. That was the moment the hammer had to fall. Not my hammer, the people's hammer, the hammer of the law that she held in such low regard. This was no longer about traffic violations. This was about an attack on the very foundations of our justice system. She had made a mockery of the one place where every citizen, rich or poor, connected or unknown, is supposed to stand equal. I knew exactly what I had to do. The law is very clear on this, and the sentence I was about to deliver was not one I would enjoy, but it was one I was morally and legally bound to impose. It was a sentence she had earned, not with her car, but with her contempt. I let the words hang in the air. "Daddy will fix it," I repeated slowly. "Miss Davenport, I am going to explain something to you because it seems no one in your 22 years on this earth has managed to. This bench, this robe, this
flag, they are not props for your social media amusement. They are the symbols of a sacred trust. The trust that we as a society have agreed to live by a common set of rules. The trust that justice will be administered without fear or favor. When you mock this court, you are not mocking me, Frank Caprio. You are mocking every person who has ever come here seeking fairness. You are mocking every police officer who puts on a uniform to enforce our laws. And yes, young lady, you are mocking the very principles your own father has dedicated his life to defending." I picked up my gavel. "On the charge of driving with a suspended license, a third offense, the law requires a mandatory minimum sentence. I am giving you the maximum: 6 months probation, a $1,000 fine, and a further license suspension of 2 years. A flicker of panic appeared in her eyes. "Wait! On the charge of reckless driving, for turning a public highway into your personal racetrack at 112 miles per hour. I am imposing the maximum fine of $500, and you will complete a mandatory 100 hours of community service at a trauma ward, where you can see the real-life consequences of such behavior." Her face was pale. "Now this is ridiculous!" "On the charge of failing to stop for a police officer, an act that put that officer's life at risk, I am sentencing you to the maximum allowed by statute, 30 days at the adult correctional institution." She gasped. The word jail had finally pierced the bubble of her privilege. "30 days? You can't do that! My father—" "I am not finished," I said, my voice cutting through hers. "That addresses your crimes on the road. Now we must address your crimes in this courtroom. The law gives judges the authority to maintain order and dignity through a mechanism known as contempt of court. It is not a power we use lightly. In all my years, I have used it less than a dozen times. But your behavior today was not a momentary lapse. It was a calculated, deliberate, and profound display of disrespect for the rule of law. You held it in mockery. You laughed at it. You believed your family name made you untouchable." I looked directly at her. "For criminal contempt of this court, I sentence you to an additional 90 days at the adult correctional institution to be served consecutively with your 30-day sentence. That is a total of 120 days. I banged the gavel. "Court is adjourned." The lesson of the gavel. As the officers escorted a now sobbing Cassandra Davenport from the courtroom, a heavy silence remained. I want to be very clear about what happened. My actions were not born of anger. They were born of a deep and sorrowful sense of duty. Punishment is not the goal. Understanding is. I did not sentence that young woman to 4 months in jail to ruin
Her life, I sentenced her to 4 months in jail to save it. I did it to protect the next innocent family she might have killed while driving at 112 miles per hour. And I did it to give her the one thing her privileged life has so clearly denied her: a hard consequence. Privilege is not a shield. It is a responsibility. To be given much is to be expected of much. Her father's position did not grant her immunity. It demanded of her a higher standard of conduct, a standard she failed to meet in the most spectacular way possible. In that jail cell, there will be no special treatment. Her name will not matter. Her father's title will not open any doors. For 120 days, she will be just a number, an equal among equals. She will have time to think, time to reflect on the fact that true character is not defined by who you know, but by what you do, and no one is there to fix it for you.
What I truly hope, what I deeply hope, is that she leaves this chapter of her life not filled with resentment, but grounded in humility. That she comes to understand a lesson life delivers sooner or later. Respect isn't a family heirloom. It isn't something you inherit, buy, or demand. Respect is earned through conduct, character, and the way you treat the people around you. Because real justice, the kind that actually changes lives, doesn't bend for bank accounts, last names, or inflated egos. Justice, when applied with integrity, cuts through all of that. It sees the truth for what it is, nothing more, nothing less. And sometimes, the most humane act a judge can take is not to shield someone from consequences, but to let them experience consequences fully. Because there are moments when the only path to growth is through the shock of reality, sharp, cold, and impossible to ignore. In this courtroom, that truth isn't theoretical. It's lived every single day. And it's the very principle Judge Frank Caprio carried through his lifelong service to the people. Justice blended with humanity, accountability delivered with empathy, fairness strengthened by compassion. That is the legacy he gave this world, a legacy we honor by continuing to tell these stories. So before we leaving into cases like this, cases that reveal why justice matters now more than ever, make sure you subscribe to Case Closed, because here we carry forward the spirit of Judge Caprio's work, reminding the world that justice isn't about punishment. It's about truth, growth, and the belief that no one is above the law.